Welcome to The Shadow of the Wind, a haunting, atmospheric literary mystery set in the heart of post-Civil War Barcelona. It's a story about forgotten books, buried secrets, obsessive love, and the powerful idea that stories are not just read, they are lived, inherited, and sometimes destroyed. Our journey begins with a young boy named Daniel Semper, whose life changes the moment his father leads him into one of the most magical places in modern fiction, the cemetery of forgotten books. The year is 1945. Barcelona is still broken after the war, its buildings pockmarked by bullets, its people moving like ghosts through narrow streets heavy with fog. Daniel is 10 years old when he wakes in terror from a dream, unable to remember his mother's face. The loss feels unbearable. His father, sensing Daniel's pain, decides it is time to share a secret passed down from father to child for generations. Before dawn, Daniel's father guides him through winding alleys, quiet plazas, and lamplit corridors until they reach an enormous old wooden door hidden in a forgotten corner of the city. A solemn custodian lets them in. After navigating twisting passages, Daniel steps into a vast, cathedral-like labyrinth of shadow and bookshelves, the cemetery of forgotten books. His father explains the rules. Everyone who enters must choose one forgotten book and protect it for life. The book becomes part of them, as if bound by destiny. He says every book has a soul, the soul of the writer and the souls of those who read it. Daniel wanders alone through the towering aisles, breathing in the smell of leather, ink, and dust. The books seem to whisper. His fingers drift across old spines until one volume calls to him, elegant, mysterious, titled The Shadow of the Wind by Julian Carax. He chooses it. Daniel reads the book overnight, completely absorbed. Carax's writing is hypnotic, romantic, tragic. By dawn, Daniel is spellbound. He wants more stories, more answers, more of Carax's world. But he quickly discovers something disturbing. Julian Carax is a vanished author, a ghost whose works have been systematically destroyed. Someone has spent decades hunting down and burning every copy of his novels. And that someone uses a name pulled straight from Carax's fiction, Lane Kubert, the name of the devil in his books. Daniel's quiet curiosity hardens into obsession. For the next 5 years, throughout his childhood and into the early years of adolescence, he begins piecing together the mystery of Carax's life. His investigation evolves slowly at first, just a boy's desire to understand the author who touched him so deeply. But as Daniel grows into his teenage years, his search becomes something darker and more dangerous. Some people react with fear when he mentions Carax. Others lie. Many claim ignorance, but all seem uncomfortable. One night, after walking home through a fog-heavy street, Daniel encounters a tall, cloaked figure with a melted, shadowed face. He smells faintly of smoke. His voice is gravel. He asks Daniel whether he is willing to sell the book. Daniel refuses. When Daniel demands his name, the stranger answers, "I am Lane Kubert." Then he vanishes into the mist. The encounter leaves Daniel terrified and more determined than ever to uncover the truth behind Carax and the book someone wants erased from history. As Daniel matures, his life begins to mirror fragments of Carax's own past. He falls in love for the first time with Clara Barceló, a beautiful, older woman whom he meets while visiting her uncle's home. Clara is blind, graceful, intelligent, and kind to Daniel in a way that fills him with hope and longing.
Their conversations about books deepen his attachment to Carax's world. Clara's affection, gentle but not romantic, echoes the doomed loves from Carax's novels. When Daniel eventually discovers Clara does not return his feelings, his heartbreak becomes a painful rite of passage, paralleling Carax's own emotional tragedies. Daniel's investigation continues, and soon he encounters one of the most memorable figures in the story, Fermín Romero de Torres, a brilliant, starving, witty homeless man living on the streets and hiding from a past filled with espionage, political corruption, and torture. Daniel first meets Fermín near the marketplace, where his humor and desperation leave a strong impression. Daniel and his father eventually hire Fermín to work in the Semper bookshop, giving him stability and purpose. Fermín quickly becomes Daniel's closest ally, part mentor, part friend, part comic relief, and a survivor of horrors he recounts with a mix of resilience and charm. Julian Carax was a passionate, brilliant, lonely man whose life was marked by betrayal, doomed love, political upheaval, and powerful enemies. Letters, journals, rumors, and half-remembered testimonies paint a picture of an author whose life mirrored his fiction so closely that the line between them seems to blur. Daniel realizes the story he is chasing is far larger than a single book. It is a story of obsessions, jealousies, and violence that began long before he was born, and it is still alive. As Daniel grows from boy to young man, The Shadow of the Wind becomes not just a book he protects, but a reflection of himself, a mirror showing his hopes, fears, heartbreaks, and coming-of-age struggles. And throughout it all, the mysterious figure calling himself Lane Kubert continues to lurk in the shadows of Daniel's life. The deeper Daniel goes into Julian Carax's past, the more he realizes something terrifying. If he fails to uncover the truth, Carax's story may vanish forever, and Daniel might vanish with it. This is where the real mystery begins.
Daniel's obsession with Julian Carax deepens as he enters late adolescence, and his world begins to intersect more directly with the lingering ghosts of Carax's past. Barcelona itself seems to shift as Daniel grows older. The quiet, fog-soaked city of his childhood evolves into a labyrinth of secrets, hidden alliances, and dangerous histories. Everywhere he turns, he finds shadows that lead back to Julian Carax. One day, Daniel decides to visit the old Barcelo mansion to see Clara again, hoping to rekindle their connection despite their painful distance. Instead, he discovers she's moved on with her life, and worse, her uncle is not pleased with Daniel's persistence. The encounter leaves Daniel humiliated and angry, but also unexpectedly free. He begins to understand that Clara, like other illusions in his life, was a chapter, not a destiny. Daniel returns to the bookshop that night, feeling hollow. Barcelona is quiet, the streets washed clean by a light rain. It is there, in that lonely space between heartbreak and curiosity, that he doubles down on the mystery of Julian Carax. If love is not yet his story, then perhaps truth is. The next breakthrough comes not from the wealthy or the well-connected, but from people who live on the margins. With Fermín now working at the bookshop, Daniel discovers a partner who is both hilariously outspoken and shockingly resourceful. Despite his ragged clothes and fragile frame, Fermín possesses a keen intellect, deep knowledge of the city's underbelly, and an uncanny ability to read people. He becomes Daniel's co-investigator, making the hunt for Carax feel less like a lonely obsession and more like a shared mission. Fermín takes Daniel to familiar places in unfamiliar ways, through markets filled with gossip,
cafes crowded with intellectuals, and alleyways brimming with rumor and tension. He teaches Daniel how to talk to people who would never speak openly to a young bookseller. Retired publishers, failed writers, unreliable witnesses, and old friends of Carax who still fear the past. Fermín approaches each interview like a duel, using charm, wit, and subtle pressure to loosen the tongues of the frightened and the reluctant. Together, they piece together fragments of Julian Carax's early life. They learn that Julian was once the only son of a wealthy Barcelona family, but a son they treated as an outsider. He was an artist, a dreamer, a young man who carried an ocean of loneliness despite growing up surrounded by privilege. He attended school at St. Gabriel's, a place where sharp minds clashed with rigid rules. There, Julian fell into a circle of classmates who would shape and eventually destroy the rest of his life. Miguel Moliner, the loyal friend, Jorge Aldaya, the volatile aristocrat, and Penelope Aldaya, Jorge's sister and the secret love of Julian's life. The hints of this past begin to feel familiar to Daniel. Like Carax, Daniel is a boy growing into a world he barely understands. Like Carax, he has loved someone who would not love him back. And like Carax, he struggles to define who he is in a city full of contradictions. But the parallels are more than emotional. They turn dangerous. As Daniel and Fermín continue their inquiries, they begin noticing that they are being followed. Sometimes it is a shadow slipping between buildings. Sometimes a stranger in a cafe who stares too long. Sometimes a silent figure in a black coat crossing the street behind them. Each time, the presence feels ominous, controlled, patient, and watching. Daniel suspects the scarred figure who called himself Lane Colbert is still near, lurking, waiting for a moment to reclaim the book. But Fermín believes there is someone else as well, someone far more dangerous, Inspector Fumero. Fermín recognizes Fumero immediately. Their pasts are woven through the same dark political networks. Fumero was once a schoolyard bully who grew into a maniacal police officer with a taste for violence. He rose in the ranks by torturing dissidents and exploiting fear during the unstable years of the Franco regime. Now, decades later, he still hunts enemies no one remembers. His brutality is legendary, and his presence in Daniel's life feels like a storm cloud forming on the horizon. Fermín warns Daniel that investigating Julian Carax is no longer a game or a hobby. It is a dangerous intrusion into old rivalries and political secrets that could get them both killed. But Daniel refuses to walk away. If anything, the threat of Fumero stills his determination. Darkness should not win, stories should not be erased, and a life like Julian Carax's should not be forgotten. Their investigation takes them next to Núria Montfort, a reserved and troubled woman who works at the city's library. She seems shaken when Daniel mentions Julian Carax, but she listens. Her eyes soften. Something inside her shifts. Núria promises she will speak with him again privately. It is clear she knows more than she admits. Daniel begins to sense that the story of Julian Carax is not simply a collection of scattered anecdotes. It is a web. Every person tied to the author either loved him intensely, betrayed him bitterly, or feared him deeply. The emotions he awakened left scars that time has not healed. But not all revelations come from the shadows. In contrast to the danger surrounding the investigation, Daniel finds a surprising comfort in Beatriz Aguilar. She is the sister of his friend Tomás, confident, sharp-witted, and far more perceptive than Daniel expects. Their early meetings are brief, sparking with playful annoyance and unspoken interest. But Bea's presence begins to fill a quiet space inside Daniel he did not realize was empty. Bea challenges him, teases him, reads him effortlessly. She sees the parts of him even he cannot articulate, the loneliness, the obsession, the heart still recovering from Clara. Daniel finds himself drawn to her, though he tells no one, not even himself. In the chiaroscuro world of Carax's mysteries, Bea feels like a burst of warm light. But the deeper Daniel and Fermín go, the more dangerous everything becomes. One afternoon, as Daniel heads home alone, he senses a figure trailing behind him. The footsteps are soft, deliberate. Daniel cuts through alleys, speeds through plazas, but the figure keeps pace. Finally, he ducks into a courtyard, heart racing, only to find Fermín waiting for him. The stalker vanishes into the night. Fermín is convinced now, someone wants Daniel silenced. Still, Daniel pushes forward. He and Fermín continue collecting clues, chasing stories of forbidden love, violent jealousy, political danger, and a young author whose life unraveled into heartbreak and disappearance. They sense that they are close, but every new answer comes with a warning, and every warning feels like a threat. Daniel begins to realize that uncovering the truth about Julian Carax will not just illuminate the past, it will shape his future and possibly endanger it. And the darkest revelations are still ahead.
Daniel's search for the truth enters a darker and more tangled phase as he and Fermín begin connecting the emotional wounds of the present to the tragedies of Julián Carax's past. By now, their investigation has become a shadow life, something Daniel hides from his father, something Fermín navigates with half-joking courage and half-real fear. They feel as though they are walking through a city of mirrors, where every reflection of the present hides another reflection of the past. Their next major lead comes from an unexpected source, a dusty, forgotten record in the archives of the Civil Registry. After days of searching, Daniel finds a file referencing a long-abandoned mansion known as the Aldaya Estate, the home of Penélope Aldaya, Julián Carax's forbidden love. The Aldaya name is infamous. Once one of the wealthiest families in Barcelona, their empire collapsed in scandal and tragedy. Daniel learns that Penélope was the daughter of a powerful banker, and Julián Carax, the son of a humble hatter, was never supposed to even breathe the air around her. Their relationship was more than forbidden. It was dangerous. As Daniel uncovers more pieces, a tragic portrait begins to form. Julián and Penélope fell in love as teenagers, meeting in secret at the Aldaya mansion. Their bond was intense, poetic, destined, but doomed. Penélope's father discovered their affair and reacted with violent fury. Whatever happened in the aftermath became a wound so deep that no one involved ever spoke of it again. The details are blurry, but the emotional truth is clear. The love that defined Julián Carax's life was also the love that destroyed it. Daniel's empathy grows. He begins to see Carax not as a mysterious author, but as a real young man, passionate, idealistic, fragile, facing obstacles Daniel himself could barely imagine. But the closer Daniel gets, the more the past begins to intrude violently on the present. One afternoon, Daniel and Fermín return to the bookshop to find the place ransacked. Papers litter the floor, shelves are overturned, the cash box is missing. Daniel's father is shaken but unhurt. The police dismiss the crime as petty theft. Fermín does not believe them for a second. To him, the signs point to a targeted break-in, someone searching for documents, letters, or clues tied to Carax. someone who wants to intimidate Daniel and silence Fermín, someone who has no fear of consequences. Daniel feels guilt wash over him. His investigation, once a private quest, now threatens the safety of the people he loves. But even this does not stop him. If anything, it deepens his conviction. Whoever wants the story buried is afraid, and fear is proof of truth. The next piece of the puzzle arrives through Núria Montfort. One evening, Núria meets Daniel privately near the docks. She is trembling, glancing over her shoulder as though expecting a ghost. She tells Daniel that she once knew Julián Carax, not briefly, not distantly, intimately. She had loved him, helped him, seen the light and darkness inside him. Núria warns Daniel that the past is dangerous, that the truth has already claimed lives. Her voice breaks when she says, "Some stories demand to be told, but only at a terrible price." Núria promises to help Daniel, but only when she can do so safely. Before leaving, she warns him to avoid Inspector Fumero at all costs. Her fear feels contagious. Meanwhile, Daniel's life continues to evolve in more hopeful ways. Bea Aguilar grows closer to him, drawn into his world almost without meaning to. Their conversations lengthen. Their teasing becomes more layered, with unspoken emotions hovering between them. Bea is quick, curious, and impossibly grounded, a light in Daniel's increasingly dark investigation. But even Bea cannot distract him entirely. Days later, Fermín is brutally attacked. Daniel finds him bleeding, barely conscious, beaten nearly to death in a back alley. The message is unmistakable. Whatever they are uncovering, someone is willing to kill to stop it. Daniel remains beside Fermín as he recovers, shaken but unbroken. The attack transforms Fermín from a charming ally into a desperate protector. He vows to help Daniel finish what they started, not because he wants the truth, but because running from the past once nearly cost him his life. Still, Daniel is no longer reckless. He feels the weight of what he carries, a story that has torn through families, friendships, and entire generations. As he watches Fermín heal, Daniel understands that he must be smarter, more cautious, more deliberate. Their next moves take them deeper into the darkest corners of Barcelona. Daniel and Fermín begin tracking down the few remaining people who knew Carax personally. Among them is an elderly man named Don Ricardo, a former teacher at San Gabriel's. Don Ricardo remembers Carax as a brilliant, disruptive student, one who wrote stories with characters who burned with desire and died from heartbreak. He recalls how Carax's classmates loved and hated him in equal measure, especially Jorge Aldaya, whose jealous temper was legendary. Most hauntingly, Don Ricardo remembers the day Carax vanished. The city whispered rumors. He had fled to Paris. He had been killed. He had run off with Penelope. But no one knew, and none of Carax's old friends would speak of him afterwards. The more Daniel learns, the clearer it becomes that Julián Carax was a man destroyed by the people closest to him, and by the one enemy who would follow him across his entire life, Inspector Fumero. Fumero and Carax had known each other as boys. Their hatred began in school, simmering for decades. Where Carax had love, art, and genius, Fumero had violence, envy, and ambition. What starts as a childhood rivalry grows to a vendetta that echoes through every chapter of Carax's life, and now Daniel's. Daniel realizes that Fumero is not just a threat,
He is a key. Whatever happened between Fumero, Carax, and the Aldaya family holds the answers he seeks. But investigating Fumero directly would mean walking into the jaws of the most dangerous man in Barcelona. Daniel begins to understand that his quest is no longer just about a book. It is about survival. It is about justice. It is about giving voice to a man who lost everything, but whose story refuses to die. As part 1 closes, Daniel stands at the edge of a darker truth than he expected. The people he loves are in danger. The shadows that erased Julian Carax are still alive. And the figure calling himself Lain Kubert continues to haunt the streets, appearing and disappearing like an omen. The closer Daniel gets to the truth, the more the past begins to breathe again. And the most dangerous chapter of the story is yet to unfold.
Daniel's investigation deepens to the point where the boundaries between the past and present begin to blur. Barcelona, once just the backdrop of his childhood, now feels like a haunted city, where every alleyway holds a memory and every quiet corner hides someone watching. The stakes have risen. Fermin's assault proves that their questions are stirring ghosts that do not want to be disturbed. While Fermin slowly recovers at the Sempere apartment, Daniel spends his days helping at the bookshop and his nights studying every fragment of Julian Carax's life. Sleep becomes rare. Restless thoughts take the place of dreams. He feels pulled into a story written long before he was born, as if some invisible thread ties him to Julian Carax across decades. His relationship with Bea Aguilar also begins to intensify quietly. Their paths cross more often, each encounter charged with unspoken tension. Bea brings a sense of balance to Daniel's increasingly chaotic world. She challenges him, pays attention to him, and seems intuitively aware of the emotional weight he carries. Daniel tries to keep his distance, especially knowing Bea is entangled in her own life problems, but the pull between them grows stronger. Despite the danger, Daniel cannot stop digging deeper. His next major clue comes from Isaac Montfort, the elderly caretaker of the Cemetery of Forgotten Books and Nuria's father. Daniel returns to the labyrinth of forgotten stories, seeking answers, hoping Isaac might clarify the fragments Julian Carax left behind. Isaac is stern and cautious, but Daniel's persistence and his reverence for Carax's novel earn a sliver of trust. Isaac reveals that Julian Carax once entered the cemetery just like Daniel, alone, searching for meaning. And Carax, too, had chosen a singular book he believed would change his life. Isaac will not say which book it was, but the implication is clear. Carax experienced the cemetery not as a symbolic ritual, but as a turning point in his destiny. Isaac warns Daniel, "Stories have claws, young man, and lives. Once they take hold of you, they don't easily let go." The warning echoes in Daniel's mind as he leaves the labyrinth. He feels the walls closing in on him, not literally, but in the way the past surrounds him, tugging him into depths he is not sure he should enter. Meanwhile, Inspector Fumero becomes increasingly present in Daniel's world. The man seems to appear at random moments, too close, too aware, too focused. Daniel sees him speaking with policemen near the market, questioning neighbors, staring at the bookshop across the street. Fumero never approaches Daniel directly, but his mere presence feels like a threat carved out of stone. Fermin, recovering but still sharp, explains what Daniel is seeing. Fumero doesn't investigate, he hunts, and he only follows something when he smells blood. Fumero's shadow grows longer. But Daniel presses forward, desperate for truth. He and Fermin begin assembling a detailed timeline of Julian Carax's life. Carax grew up isolated, misunderstood, and often cruelly dismissed by his parents. At St. Gabriel's School, he discovered friendship through Miquel Moliner and rivalry through George Aldaya. But it was Penelope Aldaya, George's sister, who transformed Julian's world. Their forbidden affair ignited a war within the Aldaya household. Penelope's father, Mr. Aldaya, reacted with ferocious anger, determined to crush the romance. Something terrible happened shortly after, something no one will speak of. Penelope vanished from public life. The Aldaya Empire collapsed. Julian Carax fled Barcelona, leaving behind whispers, broken hearts, and unanswered questions. Daniel's search for clarity leads him deeper into the ruins of the Aldaya legacy. He visits the old Aldaya mansion, now an empty, decaying structure surrounded by overgrown gardens and boarded windows. Broken glass crunches beneath his shoes. Wallpaper peels from the walls like old wounds. The house feels haunted by absence, as if holding its breath. In a forgotten room, he finds remnants of the Aldaya children's lives. Faded photos, cracked mirrors, dust-covered heirlooms. It is as if the ghosts of the family still linger, watching him from corners of the room. The atmosphere suffocates him, but he senses a truth buried within the walls. He leaves shaken, feeling as if he has trespassed into a memory Carax never wanted anyone to see. Back at the bookshop, Daniel's father grows increasingly concerned about his son's obsession. He warns Daniel gently that some stories are too heavy to carry. Daniel wants to confide in his father, to share everything he's learned, but the words lock in his throat. His father already carries the weight of his mother's death. Daniel cannot bear to add more pain. Still, Daniel's world continues unraveling in unexpected ways. Bea becomes his confidant, someone who listens not with fear, but with curiosity and empathy. Their bond deepens during quiet late-night walk through the city, illuminated by street lamps and half-moon shadows. Bea offers him something Daniel has not felt since childhood: hope. But their closeness does not go unnoticed. Bea's boyfriend, Pablo, a wealthy and entitled young man, grows suspicious. Pablo's jealousy simmers beneath the surface, creating another threat Daniel has to navigate, a mundane one, but no less dangerous in its own way. As Daniel and Fermin prepare to confront the next piece of the puzzle, another revelation shakes Daniel's world. Isaac Montfort sends word through cryptic channels. Nuria Montfort wants to meet with Daniel again. This time, she requests a secluded location and an hour of Daniel's time. The urgency in the message is unmistakable. Nuria implies that she has something that will change the course of the investigation completely, something too dangerous to put into writing. Daniel agrees, even though Fermin warns him that the timing feels wrong. Nuria's fear, Fumero's growing shadow, the recent attack, the break-in, Everything suggests that someone is tightening their grip around Daniel. But Daniel cannot stop. He is in too deep. On the night of the meeting, the city is quiet. Clouds drift over the moon. Daniel arrives early, heart pounding, sensing the magnitude of what is about to happen. Shadows slip across the street behind him. Every footstep echoes louder than it should. When Nuria finally emerges from the darkness, her hands are shaking. Her voice trembles as she tells Daniel that everything he thinks he knows about Julian Carax is only a fraction of the truth. That secrets exist which tie Carax to violence, betrayal, and a tragedy far deeper than Daniel could imagine. But before she can reveal more, a figure appears at the end of the street. Tall, dark, watching. Nuria freezes. Her voice drops to a whisper. "He's here." Daniel turns, dread crawling up his spine. The figure steps closer, slowly, deliberately, as though savoring the moment. It is the same scarred, masked man who called himself Lane Kubert. Nuria grabs Daniel's arm, terror etched across her face. "Run!" The past has finally stepped into the present, and Daniel stands face to face with a nightmare brought to life. The true danger has arrived.
Daniel and Nuria sprint through the narrow streets of Barcelona, running from the scarred figure who calls himself Lane Kubert. Their footsteps echo off the stone walls, merging with Daniel's heartbeat as terror seizes him. Nuria's breath is ragged. She leads him through twisting alleys, cutting corners with desperate precision, her fear more telling than her words. When they finally reach a sheltered archway, Nuria slumps against the wall, trembling. Daniel tries to speak, but she silences him with a gesture. Listening, waiting, praying that the footsteps behind them have faded into the night. Only when she is certain they're alone does she finally meet his eyes. "This isn't just a story, Daniel. It never was," she whispers. Nuria confesses that the scarred man is not merely a stranger obsessed with destroying books. He is entwined with Julian Carax's life in ways most people cannot comprehend. She warns Daniel that the figure wearing the mask is not Lane Kubert, not the devil of Carax's fiction, but someone who has chosen that identity because he knows the power it holds. Someone who once loved Julian Carax. Someone who once betrayed him. Someone who is still alive. Before Daniel can ask more, Nuria insists they relocate to her apartment, where they can speak safely, or at least safer than in the open air, where shadows cling like hungry spirits. They walk cautiously through the dimly lit streets until they reach her modest home. The atmosphere inside is somber and sparse. Piles of books and papers fill the corners, the remnants of a life defined by quiet obsession and unspoken sorrow. Once inside, Nuria locks the door and lowers her voice. "It's time you know the truth about Julian, about the Aldaya family, about everything that happened." Daniel sits across from her, bracing himself as Nuria begins to unravel the tangled threads of a story that has haunted her entire life. Nuria was not just a distant admirer of Carax. She was one of the last people to truly know him. She met him in Paris, years after he fled Barcelona. By that time, Julian was a broken man, living in poverty, writing passionately, but selling nothing. She loved him, quietly, desperately, the way someone loves a star that will never fall to earth. Yet Carax, still consumed by his love for Penelope Aldaya, never returned her feelings. Still, Nuria stood by him. She typed his manuscripts. She supported him as best she could. She tried to piece together the ruins of his life. And she watched helplessly as tragedy after tragedy hollowed him out until he became a ghost of who he once was. What Daniel does not expect is the revelation that Julián Carax attempted to return to Barcelona once, not for his career, not for glory, but to confront the truth about what happened to Penelope Aldaya. But he never made it home. Something or someone stopped him. As Nuria speaks, Daniel feels a coldness settling inside him. It is one thing to read tragedy in a book. It is another to realize the world is full of people who will do anything to destroy love. Nuria reaches under her bed and retrieves a small wooden box. Inside, she keeps a stack of letters, yellowed with age and frayed at the edges. They are written in Julián's hand, emotional, fevered, filled with longing and despair. As Daniel reads the first few lines, he can feel the electricity of Julián's voice. The handwriting trembles with urgency. Every sentence feels like a shard of broken glass. In these letters, Julián confesses his fear, his longing for Penelope, and his hatred for the man who destroyed their lives. Inspector Fumero. Daniel's blood turns cold. The name returns like a nightmare. Nuria tells him the truth. Fumero was once a schoolmate of Julián's, a violent bully with a poisonous heart. As adults, their paths crossed again in far darker circumstances. Fumero became a monster forged by the Franco regime. He targeted anyone who challenged him, and Carax became one of his obsessions. Fumero despised Julián for his talent, for his passion, for his defiance. And when Julián fell in love with Penelope Aldaya, the daughter of one of the most powerful men in Barcelona, Fumero saw an opportunity. He weaponized jealousy, fear, and cruelty. Whatever happened to Penelope Aldaya, whatever catastrophe destroyed her family, Fumero was involved. Daniel's voice shakes. So Fumero is behind all of this. Nuria nods. He is a man who destroys everything he touches. The more Nuria reveals, the more Daniel feels the past tightening around him like a noose. But then comes the revelation that tilts the entire investigation on its axis. The scarred man calling himself Lain Kubert is Julián Carax, alive. Daniel is stunned into silence. Nuria explains that Carax survived an attack that left him burned and disfigured. The world assumed him dead. Only a few, including Nuria, knew he was still alive. Embittered, broken, and haunted, Julián returned to Barcelona in secret. But instead of rebuilding his life, he became a ghost wandering the city, consumed by the belief that his books had brought nothing but pain. He began seeking them out, not to cherish them, but to destroy them. Daniel realizes the truth is even darker than he imagined. The figure stalking the streets, burning the novels, and following him is not an enemy of Carax. It is Carax. A man so destroyed by grief that he hunts his own past. The revelation rocks Daniel to his core. Everything he thought he understood about Lain Kubert, the danger, the mystery, collapses into a new, more tragic picture. Carax is not just a victim or a misunderstood genius. He is a man running from himself. Before Daniel can fully process this, Nuria continues her confession. She tells him that the Aldaya tragedy, the true fate of Penelope, is something so devastating that Carax never spoke of it again.
Nuria has carried the secret for years. She believes Daniel needs to know it, but before she can reveal it, a loud knock echoes through the apartment. Nuria stiffens. Another knock, harder. Daniel's heart drops into his stomach. Nuria whispers, "Get behind the wardrobe, don't make a sound." Her face is white with fear. The knocking becomes pounding. Daniel slips into the shadowed corner of the room, heart pounding, watching through a narrow crack. The door bursts open. Inspector Fumero steps inside. Cold, merciless, a predator who has finally caught the scent he has been following. Nuria stands trembling, but she lifts her chin with quiet resolve. Daniel holds his breath. Fumero closes the door behind him. The lock clicks. The past has come for them both.
Fumero steps into Nuria's small apartment like a blade cutting through silence. His eyes are sharp, black with contempt, searching every shadow for threats. Daniel presses himself into the narrow gap behind the wardrobe, holding his breath so tightly his chest aches. Even from hiding, he can feel the temperature in the room drop as Fumero's presence fills it, cold, oppressive, deadly. Nuria stands frozen, but she does not collapse. Instead, she meets Fumero's stare with a quiet defiance born of a lifetime surviving men like him. "Inspector," she says carefully, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. Fumero takes a slow, predatory step toward her. "You've been very difficult to find, Señorita Montfort." His tone is almost casual, which makes it infinitely more terrifying. Nuria does not answer. Fumero surveys the room, taking in the stacks of books, the papers on the table, the wooden box with Julian Carax's letters. Daniel prays Fumero won't open it. He prays Fumero won't find him. His heart beats so loudly he fears it will give him away. Fumero lifts one of Carax's letters, scans the handwriting, and smiles, a slow, cruel smile. "You're still loyal to him," he mutters, "after all these years." Nuria draws a breath. "What do you want, Inspector?" Fumero turns toward her. "I want to know where Julian Carax is." The words land like a hammer. Nuria's silence is an answer in itself. Fumero's expression hardens. His cruelty is immediate and practiced. He backhands her across the face with a force that knocks her to the ground. Daniel flinches silently, rage and helpless terror swirling inside him. Fumero crouches beside her. "You think protecting him matters? You think it changes anything? Carax is already dead. He just hasn't stopped breathing yet." Nuria wipes blood from her lip, eyes shining with pain but also resolve. "I'm not telling you anything." Fumero straightens, pacing slowly around the room. "You people and your stories," he sneers. "Carax wrote his little novels, and people like you, pathetic idealists, worship them as if they're sacred. But all they ever brought anyone was misery." He stops near the wardrobe, close enough that Daniel can see the shadow of his boots beneath the crack. Daniel stills every muscle in his body. "But then misery is something I'm quite familiar with." He kicks aside a chair and returns to Nuria. "You're going to tell me where Carax is," he says softly, "or I'm going to make you wish you had." Nuria closes her eyes. "No." Fumero's jaw tenses. "You're in love with him, still, even now." Nuria's answer is barely audible. "Yes." Fumero grabs her by the hair, forcing her head up. "And you think he loves you?" Nuria's pained whisper cuts through the room. "No, but I loved the part of him that still had hope." Fumero's expression twists with contempt, not just hatred of Carax, but hatred of anyone capable of love he never received. Without warning, he strikes her again. Daniel's entire body surges forward instinctively, but he forces himself back, knowing he would only get them both killed. Fumero drags Nuria toward the desk. Papers scatter across the floor, books fall. He wants the truth, and he wants to destroy her on the way to getting it. "Nuria," he says, leaning close, "I know you helped him. I know you wrote to him, carried messages, smuggled letters. Tell me where he is, and maybe I'll let you live." Nuria looks at him with eyes full of sorrow and steel. "You're too late, Inspector. You've always been." Fumero freezes. For the first time, uncertainty flickers in his gaze. Nuria continues, voice soft but unwavering. "You destroyed Julian Carax's life. You destroyed Penelope's. You destroyed the Aldaya family. And you couldn't even kill him properly." Fumero's face reddens with fury. "You think this is a game?" He draws his pistol. Daniel nearly gasps aloud. Nuria does not move. "You won't find him, because he's already found you." Before Fumero can react to the meaning of her words, a faint sound comes from the hallway outside. Footsteps, then silence. Fumero turns sharply, gun raised. Nuria seizes the moment. She grabs the wooden box of Carax's letters and hurls it toward the window. It crashes, scattering papers everywhere. Fumero fires, hitting the wall inches from her head. She dives for cover. Daniel cannot stay hidden a second longer. He bursts from the wardrobe and charges at Fumero from behind. The impact is enough to throw the inspector off balance. The gun clatters to the floor. Fumero recovers almost instantly, slamming Daniel against the wall with a force that knocks the wind out of him. "You," Fumero snarls, recognizing him, "the little bookseller." He tightens his grip around Daniel's throat. Daniel clamors at his hands, vision blurring, lungs screaming for air. He hears Nuria shout his name, then chaos. The door slams open, a blur of movement. Someone tackles Fumero from behind. It's a neighbor, a large, terrified man who must have heard the gunshot. The apartment erupts in panic. Fumero roars, turning his wrath on the neighbor, striking him down with brutal efficiency. Daniel collapses, gasping for breath. Nuria grabs Daniel's arm. "Run!" But Daniel refuses to leave her. "You come too!" "No, no," Nuria insists, eyes wide with urgency. "He'll chase you. He wants you more than he wants me. Run, Daniel. Now." Daniel hesitates. "Nuria!" She grips his face, her voice breaking. "You must finish the story. Go." Fumero rises, turning toward them with murder in his eyes. Nuria shoves Daniel toward the door. "Go!" Daniel runs. He hears Fumero shout. He hears a struggle behind him. He hears a cry. That one sounds like hope being torn apart. He bursts into the street, sprinting through the night, heart pounding, eyes drenched in terror. The city blurs around him as tears mix with sweat. He does not stop running until he reaches the bookshop. Only then does the truth settle inside him like ice. Nuria Montfort may have just sacrificed her life to save his. And the secrets of Julian Carax's past, the truth she almost revealed, now carry a weight so heavy Daniel can barely breathe. He collapses in the shadows of the bookshop doorway. He has never felt so lost, He has never felt so alone, and the story is far from over.
Daniel spends the night in a state of shock, his mind replaying the attack again and again. He sits on the floor of the bookshop, trembling, unable to speak. His father finds him at dawn, pale and hollow-eyed, and carries him upstairs without a word. Daniel tries to explain what happened, Nuria's confession, Fumero's arrival, the violence, but the details spill out in broken fragments. His father listens, deeply shaken. The danger Daniel has been circling for years has finally erupted into the present, and the weight of it is unbearable for them both. When the police arrive to question him, Daniel says almost nothing. He knows Fumero will hear every word. He knows telling the truth will only put others in danger, including Bea, Fermin, and his father. The officers leave frustrated, but Daniel's silence is not born of fear. It is born of clarity. He has crossed the threshold. He has seen the monster Julian Carax spent his life running from. Daniel collapses into an uneasy sleep that afternoon, haunted by images of Nuria's trembling hands, Fumero's cold stare, and the masked figure of Lain Kuber, Carax, watching from the edges of the city. When he wakes, the world feels heavier, as if gravity itself has grown stronger around him. Still, Daniel refuses to surrender to fear. He needs to find out what happened to Nuria. He needs answers about Penelope Aldaya, and most of all, he needs to understand Julian Carax, not as a myth or a phantom, but as a man. But he cannot do it alone. When Bea Aguilar arrives unannounced that evening, Daniel is startled to see her. She steps inside with confident determination, scanning his exhausted face. "You look like you've been hit by a train," she says softly. Daniel tries to joke, but the words won't come. Bea sits beside him, their knees almost touching, and waits for him to speak. Her presence feels like a lifeline, warm, grounding, real. Slowly, painfully, Daniel tells her everything. Bea listens in silence, eyes wide with fear and disbelief. When he finishes, she takes his hand. "You're not doing this alone," she says. "I'm with you." Her words break something inside Daniel, something he didn't know he was holding together. Bea becomes the steady force he desperately needs. Still, Daniel knows they must be careful. Bea's relationship with Pablo, jealous, impulsive, and violent, becomes a new threat. If Pablo realizes Bea is spending time with Daniel, especially under such dangerous circumstances, the consequences could be severe. But fear cannot extinguish purpose. Daniel and Bea decide to pick up where Nuria left off. Their first plan: locate Nuria. Daniel and Bea travel to Nuria's apartment under cover of darkness. The door is open. The interior is silent, too silent. Papers are scattered across the floor. The wooden box is shattered. The smell of cigarette smoke, fumeros, lingers in the air like a curse. They move cautiously through the wreckage. In the corner, Bea finds a dark stain on the floor. Daniel kneels beside it, touching the dried edge with trembling fingers. It is blood. A thick, suffocating grief rises inside him. Nuria's voice echoes in his mind. "You must finish the story." Bea squeezes his shoulder gently.
She knows what he's thinking, but refuses to let the fear consume him. "Daniel," she says softly, "we don't know anything yet. We have to keep going." Her words steady him. As they search the apartment, Bea finds a hidden drawer tucked beneath the wardrobe, the same wardrobe Daniel hid behind. Inside is a single envelope addressed to M. Sempere. Daniel opens it with shaking hands. Inside is a letter written by Nuria in hurried handwriting, a letter she must have prepared in case she didn't survive her confrontation with Fumero. In it, Nuria writes the truth she never had the chance to say aloud. She confesses that Penelope Aldaya and Julian Corax did indeed plan to run away together. They intended to escape the suffocating control of her father, who despised Julian with a hatred born of class, pride, and old secrets. But their plan was discovered. Penelope was locked away in the mansion, forbidden to see Julian again. Her father spread lies about her, claiming she had run off in disgrace. Julian received no word. Days became weeks, weeks became months, and he never stopped waiting. Nuria's letter grows darker as it unfolds. The Aldaya mansion hid a truth so horrific that even she struggled to put it into words. Penelope did not run away. She did not disappear. The locked room where she was imprisoned became her tomb. Penelope was pregnant, and she died in childbirth, alone, unseen, hidden by her father, who felt her love was an unforgivable betrayal. Daniel feels the blood drain from his face. Bea covers her mouth, tears forming. The letter explains that Julian never knew what became of Penelope. When he returned to Barcelona years later, scarred and broken, he searched for her in every corner of the city. Nuria met him then, a man desperate and drowning in grief. He discovered the truth eventually, but by then the damage had hollowed him out. The Julian Corax the world once knew died in that moment, replaced by the scarred figure calling himself Lain Kubert, a man who burned his own books in an attempt to erase the story of his suffering. Fumero's role in all of this, Nuria hints, was far darker than Daniel or Bea imagined. He was in love with Penelope himself, not with tenderness, but with a twisted possessiveness that drove him to monstrous acts. He harbored a hatred of Corax since childhood, and when the opportunity came to strike at him, he took it with unrestrained cruelty. Daniel finishes the letter, hands shaking. Nuria ends it with a final plea. Julian Corax does not deserve to die as a ghost. Find him. Let him see that his story has survived. Let him know that the world has not forgotten him. Daniel folds the letter carefully, as though it contains the beating heart of the man whose life he has been trying to piece together for years. Bea sits beside him, tears in her eyes, but her voice steady. "We have to find him, Daniel, before Fumero does." Daniel nods. The grief weighing on him transforms into a fierce clarity. "Yes, we will." But as they leave the apartment, unaware they are being watched from across the street, one truth becomes clear. The past is no longer just a mystery. It is a storm, and Daniel and Bea have just stepped into its center.
Daniel and Bea leave Nuria's apartment with the letter clutched tightly in Daniel's hand, its weight far heavier than a few sheets of paper. The truth inside it
lingers like a ghost walking beside them. Penelope's tragic death, the cruelty of her father, the hollowing of Julian Carax's spirit, and the monstrous jealousy of Fumero. Everything Daniel thought he understood has transformed into something far darker, more devastating, and more urgent. They walk in silence through the dimly lit streets until they reach the edge of the Ramla. The city feels colder than usual, as if mourning the story they have just uncovered. Bea finally breaks the silence. "We have to find him," she says again, voice firm despite her tears. Daniel nods. He can barely speak. The grief, the rage, the empathy he feels for Carax overwhelm him. For years, Daniel has been chasing a shadow, a mystery, a half-remembered voice between pages. Now he chases a man, a wounded soul who has lived too long in the dark. But as they make their way back to the Sempere bookshop, they fail to notice the silhouette following them from the rooftops and alleys. Fumero's reach spreads through Barcelona's veins, and he is aware now, painfully aware, that Daniel has stepped beyond the point of return. When Daniel and Bea arrive at the shop, Fermín is waiting, leaning on a cane, pale from the attack, but still full of sharp, defiant humor. "You look like someone stole your innocence and then gave you paperwork about it," Fermín says. Daniel almost manages a smile, but the letter in his hand feels like lead. Once inside, they tell Fermín everything, about Núria, about Penelope, about Julian Carax's life in Paris, and the truth behind the Aldaya tragedy. Fermín listens with rare seriousness, his eyes dimming when Penelope's fate is revealed. "That," he says softly, "is the kind of story that breaks a man forever." Bea watches them both, her eyes flicking between grief and determination. Daniel unfolds Núria's letter again and places it on the table. "There's one thing she didn't answer," he says. "Where is Carax now?" Fermín strokes his chin thoughtfully. "If he's still hiding in Barcelona, and I suspect he is, he'd go somewhere quiet, somewhere invisible, somewhere he could watch without being seen." Bea leans closer. "You mean like the place where you found him?" Daniel jolts upright. "Wait, found who?" Fermín hesitates. A rare vulnerability crosses his face. "The homeless man, who used to lurk near the burned-out buildings by the old factory district. The one I told you was a ghost in the wrong world. I thought he was just another soul swallowed by the war." Daniel's heart stops. "Fermín, what did he look like?" Fermín thinks. Tall, thin, moved like someone carrying more pain than bones. And his face, well, you'd remember it if you saw it. Burned, scarred, like he'd survived something he shouldn't have. Daniel and Bea exchange a look that says everything. "It was him," Bea whispers. "Carax," Daniel breathes. "He's alive, and here." Fermín's eyes widen with a mix of shock and dread. "In that case," he says carefully, "we must get to him before Fumero does." The urgency in the room sets their next steps in motion. They begin preparing to search the abandoned industrial district, a cluster of crumbling warehouses, old factories, and forgotten courtyards where the city's poorest and most invisible live. It is a place where secrets can survive for decades. Bea insists on going with them. Fermín protests immediately. "You're not coming to a place where policemen fear to patrol." Bea crosses her arms. "I'm not letting Daniel go without me." The silence that follows says more about Bea's courage than any argument could. Fermín exhales. "All right," he concedes. "But we stick together. And the moment I say run, you run." Before they leave, Daniel returns home briefly to assure his father, but he cannot bring himself to reveal everything. He simply says he must stay with Fermín tonight. His father, worn with worry, but trusting in Daniel's instincts, nods and lets him go. Barcelona at night feels like a different world, narrower, darker, sharper around the edges. Fog coils around the lampposts like restless spirits. The industrial district looms like a forgotten skeleton of the city's past. As they navigate the broken streets, they hear distant voices, scraping metal, the hum of unseen machinery. Everything feels abandoned, yet somehow alive. Finally, near a half-collapsed warehouse, Fermín signals them to stop. "This is the place," he whispers. "This is where I've seen him before." They approach slowly. A faint light flickers inside the warehouse. Dim, trembling, barely more than a candle's glow. Daniel moves forward cautiously. Bea and Fermín stay close behind. Inside, the air smells of dust and old ashes. Crates are stacked against the walls. A single candle burns atop a crate, casting a warm halo over a hunched figure sitting against the far wall. The figure is thin, wrapped in a worn coat. Shadows cling to him as if trying to hide his outline. Daniel steps closer. "Señor Carax," he whispers. The figure does not move at first. Then, slowly, painfully, he lifts his head. Daniel sees the scars, deep, jagged burns that have reshaped his face into a map of suffering. But behind those scars, the eyes are unmistakable. Eyes full of sorrow. Eyes that have seen the worst of humanity. Eyes that once belonged to a man who dreamed of stories and love and escape. The man speaks in a low, hoarse voice. "You should not be here." Daniel's breath catches. "It's you, Julián Carax." The man closes his eyes briefly, as if the name causes him pain. That man died a long time ago. Bea steps forward gently. "No," she says. "He didn't." Carax opens his eyes again, studying her, then Daniel, then Fermín. "You brought her letter," he says quietly. "Nuria." Daniel nods, swallowing hard. "She wanted you to know your story survived, that someone cared." Carax flinches, a small, fragile movement. "I didn't want it to," he murmurs. "My story brought only ruin. Burning the books was the only mercy left in it." Daniel shakes his head. "That's not true. Your story saved me, and others. It deserves to live." A faint, sorrowful smile touches Carax's lips. "You don't understand," he says. "Fumero. He won't stop. He never stops." "We're here to protect you," Daniel says. "You can't protect me, but you may still save yourselves." Before Daniel can answer, a faint metallic echo rings through the warehouse, a noise that freezes them all. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, purposeful. Fermín grabs Daniel and Bea, panic flashing in his eyes. "He found us." Carax's expression turns grim. It's Fumero. Daniel feels the world tilt. The storm has caught up with them, and there is no turning back.
The footsteps echo through the warehouse like the heartbeat of something monstrous. Slow, deliberate, metallic, a predator savoring the hunt. Daniel's pulse quickens as Fumero's silhouette appears in the doorway, illuminated by the faint glow of the candle flickering on the crate. The shadows stretch grotesquely behind him, making the inspector look larger than life, a specter carved from hatred itself. For a moment, time holds its breath. Fermín instinctively steps in front of Daniel and Bea, shielding them with his thin, battered frame. Though still recovering from the brutal beating he endured, the fire in his eyes is unbroken, defiant, even taunting.
Carax, leaning against the wall, watches with unsettling stillness. He looks like a man who has run out of escapes, out of hope, yet still out of reach of surrender. Fumero takes a single step inside, eyes sweeping the room with predatory calculation. "Well," he says softly, almost pleased, "what a touching reunion. The ghost, the bookseller, the little girl, and the cripple. I must say I'm flattered." Fermín lifts his chin. "Flattered, Inspector? I always struck me as someone who could barely spell the word." Fumero's smile hardens. "I'm going to enjoy killing you." Bea squeezes Daniel's arm, fear radiating through her touch. Daniel's throat tightens. He knows Fermín is in no condition to fight. Carax is too frail. He himself is unarmed, and Fumero, ruthless, armed with nothing to lose, stands between them and survival. Fumero turns his attention to Carax, hatred burning through his eyes. "Julian Carax, I should have finished you years ago." Carax stands slowly, steadying himself with one hand. "You tried," he says quietly, "but I'm still here." Fumero laughs, a cold, humorless sound. "Barely. Look at you, a burned-out rat living in the ruins of the city you tried to escape. And for what? A girl who preferred to die rather than be with you?" Daniel steps forward without thinking. "Shut up!" The words burst out before he can control them. Bea gasps and grips his arm tighter. Fermín shoots Daniel a murderous look, not out of anger, but fear. Fumero's eyes narrow like a hawk spotting prey. "Well," Fumero murmurs, "the little bookseller found his courage." Before Daniel can move, Fumero raises his gun and points it directly at him. Bea pulls Daniel back, but Fumero chuckles. "Don't bother hiding. I have a good memory for faces I want to erase." Then, in a single fluid motion, he shifts his aim toward Carax. Daniel's breath catches. "No!" Carax does not flinch. He stands exposed and unmoving, like a man embracing his final chapter. "You should be dead," Fumero says. "Your story should have burned with the rest of your pathetic books." Carax's voice comes out soft, but full of a strange, weary strength. "You destroyed everything I loved, but you couldn't destroy the words." Fumero's expression twists. "I will now." He takes aim, but Fermín moves first. He throws himself at Fumero, using every ounce of strength left in his broken body. The warehouse erupts into chaos. The gun fires, a deafening explosion that echoes through the metal rafters, and sparks fly as the bullet ricochets off a metal beam. Fermín and Fumero struggle violently, Fumero's strength overwhelming, his boots scraping across the concrete floor. "Run!" Fermín shouts. "Get out of here!" Bea grabs Daniel's wrist, pulling him toward the back entrance, but Daniel hesitates. "Fermín!" "Go, damn it!" Fermín roars, grappling with Fumero's arm. Carax limps toward them. "This way," he rasps. "There's a passage behind the furnace." The gun goes off again. Daniel flinches. Bea screams. Carax's eyes widen as sparks rain down. Fermín collapses, not from the bullet, but from a blow to the ribs. Fumero rises, blood smeared across his cheek from the struggle. The inspector lifts his weapon again. Carax shouts, "Move!" Daniel grabs Bea, and the three of them dive behind a row of crates just as another gunshot explodes through the air. Wood splinters, dust fills Daniel's lungs. The candle on the crate flickers wildly, casting the warehouse in jerking shadows.
Karax leads them toward the furnace, a rusted metal structure tucked behind stacks of debris. Behind it, barely visible, is a narrow passage carved into the wall like a forgotten escape route. "This way," Karax urges, voice urgent. But as they slip into the passage, Daniel hears footsteps pounding behind them. Fumero. He is relentless. He fires again, and the bullet grazes the wall inches from Daniel's head. Daniel stumbles, and Bea catches him before he falls. The passage twists and narrows as they run. Karax limps heavily, breathing in sharp, pained bursts. Daniel realizes the older man is running on nothing but adrenaline and sorrow. "Up ahead," Karax whispers, "there is a ladder. It leads to the old courtyard." They reach the ladder, a rusted metal frame bolted into the wall, stretching toward faint moonlight above. "Bea first," Daniel says. Karax shakes his head. "No, you go. Protect her." Daniel refuses. "We're getting out together." Bea climbs quickly. Daniel follows her. Below, Karax waits at the base of the ladder, and then the warehouse door bursts open behind him. Fumero enters the passage. Karax looks up at Daniel. "Go." Daniel shakes his head desperately. "No, climb." Karax gives him a sad, gentle smile, the smile of a man who has lived through more pain than any story can hold. "I won't let him hurt you." Fumero steps closer, gun raised. "Karax, it ends now." Karax turns to face him, standing tall despite his broken body. "You want me, Inspector?" Karax says, voice steady. "Here I am." Fumero smiles, a smile of triumph, of long-awaited vengeance. He raises the gun. Karax lunges. A struggle erupts below Daniel and Bea, a violent blur of limbs and shadows. Gunshots explode. The metal of the ladder tremble under Daniel's grip. "Daniel!" Bea calls above him. "Come on!" Daniel looks down. He sees two silhouettes, one falling, one rising. Fumero is rising. Karax is not. Daniel's heart shatters. Bea reaches down from the top of the ladder, tears streaking her face. "Daniel, please climb!" He forces himself upward, toward Bea, toward the night air, toward survival, as the monster who destroyed Julian Karax turns his gaze upward, eyes burning with murderous intent. And Daniel knows the final confrontation is coming. The past is not done with him. Not yet.
Daniel climbs the last rungs of the ladder with hands trembling so violently he can barely hold on. Bea pulls him up into the cold night air of the courtyard, her breath quick and uneven. The moon hangs high above the derelict buildings, casting pale light over broken tiles, rusted machinery, and crumbling walls. Everything feels unreal, as if the world itself is holding its breath, unsure whether to collapse or keep turning. Daniel stumbles into the courtyard and collapses to his knees. His chest heaves. His vision blurs. The last image of Julian Karax, lunging into the darkness to save them, burns behind his eyes like a scar. Bea kneels beside him, wrapping her arms around him, whispering his name again and again. "Daniel? Daniel, you're safe. You're safe." But Daniel doesn't feel safe. Below them, inside the warehouse, he hears the metallic clang of the ladder as Fumero begins climbing. Bea hears it too. She pulls Daniel toward a narrow corridor leading to the outer alley. "We have to move," she urges. Daniel forces himself up, his body shaking, his soul burning with grief and rage. He stumbles after Bia, feeling the weight of Carax's sacrifice pounding against his ribs. The night air feels sharp in his lungs as they sprint through the maze of the industrial district. Behind them, a gunshot cracks the air. Bia screams. Daniel pulls her behind a stone barrier. The bullet slams into the wall, showering them with fragments of brick. Fumero's voice echoes through the courtyard, dark and triumphant. "You can run, boy, but you won't get far." Daniel grips Bia's hand and pulls her into a narrow alley between two rusted factory buildings. Their footsteps echo off the metal and stone, mixing with Daniel's ragged breathing. "We have to find Fermín," Bia whispers. Daniel nods, but he can barely think. His mind keeps replaying the fight. Carax standing tall, Carax lunging at Fumero, Carax falling. The man whose story Daniel followed for years has just given him a chance to survive. But Fumero isn't done. As they emerge from the alley into a wider street, Daniel hears the inspector's footsteps closing in. Fumero moves with unnatural determination, driven by decades of hatred that no bullet, no flame, no wound has ever stopped. "Daniel!" Bia gasps. "There!" Across the street, leaning against a lamppost, is Fermín. Battered, bruised, and holding a metal pipe like a warrior preparing for a final stand. "What took you too long?" Fermín wheezes. Daniel and Bia sprint toward him. But Fumero appears at the mouth of the alley before they can reach the safety of the next corner. He raises his gun. Daniel freezes. Time slows. Bia clutches Daniel's hand. Fermín steps forward, planting his feet firmly on the cracked pavement. "Fumero, you've done enough. Let them go." Fumero smirks. "You should have stayed dead, Romero." Daniel steps in front of Bia, trembling but resolute. Fumero points the gun at Daniel's chest. "You want to protect him, Fermín? Watch me kill him." The world narrows into a single horrible moment. Fermín raises his pipe. Fumero pulls the trigger. The gunshot explodes. Bia screams. Daniel flinches, but no pain comes. Instead, Fermín collapses. He falls into Daniel's arms, the pipe clattering to the ground. Blood blooms across Fermín's shirt, a spreading, terrible crimson flower. "No!" Daniel chokes out. "No! No! No!" Fermín forces a pained smile. "Don't cry, Daniel. I've had worse hangovers." Bia sobs, pressing her hands over the wound. "Fermín, stay with us." Fumero steps forward, calm, methodical, his gun still raised. It's time to end this. Daniel shields Bia and Fermín with his body. His heart hammers. He knows there is no escape, no alley, no miracle, no time. And then the sound of approaching footsteps. Not Fumero's. Behind the inspector, a tall, shadowy figure limps into view, a figure built of darkness and pain, but still standing. Julián Carax. His coat is tattered. His movements are slow, but his presence burns through the night like a ghost refusing to die. Fumero turns, stunned. "You... how?" Carax speaks through gritted teeth.
You took everything from me. Tonight, it ends. Fumero snarls, aiming his gun at Carax. But Carax moves first. He lunges, grabbing Fumero's wrist. The gun fires wildly, the bullet ricocheting off a wall. Carax drives Fumero backward, both men crashing into a pile of broken crates. They struggle violently, fueled by decades of rage and grief. Daniel tries to stand, but Bia pulls him back. "No! You'll get killed!" Carax and Fumero roll across the ground, striking, clawing, grappling. Fumero, stronger but frenzied, gains the advantage. He pins Carax and raises the gun again, his eyes burning with satisfaction. "This time, I finish it." Daniel feels his heart stop. But Carax is not done. Using the last of his strength, he shoves upward, knocking the gun aside. It fires into the air. He strikes Fumero across the face, sending him reeling. The gun drops to the ground between them. Both men lunge for it. Daniel cries out, helpless. Fumero reaches it first. He lifts the gun, aiming directly at Carax's chest. A second before he fires, a pipe swings out of nowhere. Fermín. Bleeding, barely standing, but alive. He slams the pipe into Fumero's head with every ounce of strength left inside him. Fumero collapses. Silence. The inspector falls face first onto the cracked pavement, motionless. Fermín drops the pipe and sinks to the ground, exhausted. Carax stumbles back, gasping for air, staring at the man who finally brought Fumero down. Daniel rushes to him. "Carax, you're alive!" Carax shakes his head. "No, I'm just not dead yet." Bia helps Fermín sit upright, applying pressure to his wound again. Daniel kneels beside Carax. "You saved us." Carax looks at him, really looks at him for the first time. "You saved me," he says quietly. "Your belief, your insistence that my story meant something. I had forgotten what hope felt like." Daniel feels tears sting his eyes. Carax glances at Bia, at Fermín, and at the collapsed form of Fumero. "It's over," Daniel whispers. Carax nods slowly. "For the first time, it might be." The three survivors, Daniel, Bia, and Fermín, sit in the quiet ruins of the night, breathing, trembling, alive. Carax watches them with eyes full of pain and something almost like peace. Above them, dawn begins to glow behind the rooftops. The nightmare that haunted decades has finally been laid to rest. But Carax's story, and Daniel's, is not finished yet. The last chapter is waiting.
The hours after Fumero's death move with the surreal slowness of a city waking from a nightmare it didn't know it was dreaming. Dawn creeps over Barcelona, staining the skyline with faint gold, as Daniel, Bea, Fermín, and Carax limp through the abandoned industrial district toward safety. Daniel and Fermín support Carax on either side. His breath is weak, uneven, but he walks with a stubborn, haunted dignity, the dignity of someone who has been running from death for decades and has finally stopped. Bea leads them silently, glancing back every few steps to make sure no one is following. Even though Fumero is gone, the weight of his violence still hangs over the city like a bruise. When they finally reach the edge of the district, Fermín collapses to one knee. His wound bleeds through the makeshift bandage Bea wrapped around him. "Fermín!" Daniel shouts, lowering Carax gently. Fermín waves him off, trying for a crooked smile. "I told you I'd live long enough to haunt you." Bea crouches beside him, her face tight with worry. "You need a doctor." "A doctor?" Fermín scoffs weakly. "What I need is a pension reform, a warm bath, and a woman who doesn't mind a man with a bullet hole." Daniel almost laughs, but the exhaustion hits him harder than the fear. Carax sinks against a brick wall, closing his eyes. His skin is ghost pale, every breath a struggle. "We need to get him somewhere safe," Daniel says. "Somewhere no one will think to look." Bea thinks for a moment. "Your father's bookshop cellars." Daniel shakes his head. "No, too dangerous. Fumero had eyes everywhere." Fermín raises a trembling hand. "Take him to Barcelo." Daniel looks at him, confused. "Gustavo Barcelo?" "The old bibliophile owes me several favors," Fermín mutters weakly. "And he has a basement no one knows about. A labyrinth, really, much like the cemetery of forgotten books. Perfect for hiding a story that refused to die." Bea nods. "It's close. Let's move." The walk to Barcelo's home feels endless. The city is quiet, still half asleep, unaware of the violence that unfolded in its forgotten streets. When they arrive, Gustavo Barcelo opens the door in his robe, startled and horrified by their condition. "Good heavens, what happened?" he cries. "No time," Fermín says, waving a hand. "Get your keys, your courage, and ideally a bottle of something strong." Barcelo ushers them inside and leads them to the cellar. A vast, shadowed labyrinth lined with books, antique furniture, and old manuscripts. It feels like a cousin of the cemetery of forgotten books, smelling of ink, dust, and vanished histories. Carax sinks onto a cot, prepared hastily by Barcelo. Daniel kneels beside him. "You're safe now." Carax laughs, a dry, fragile sound. "No one who has lived my story is ever safe." Daniel shakes his head fiercely. "It's over. Fumel is dead." Carax stares at him, a long, searching gaze. "I thought I would feel something. Relief, triumph, rage. But all I feel is tired." Daniel touches his arm gently. "You're not alone anymore." Carax closes his eyes. "Thank you, Daniel." Fermín is laid out on a sofa, pale and losing strength. Barcelo grabs medical supplies with surprising competence, disinfectant, cloth, stitching needles. Daniel helps hold Fermín still while Barcelo works. "You should have seen the other guy," Fermín mutters through clenched teeth as the needle goes in. Daniel forces a smile. "I did. He's not getting back up." Bea kneels beside him, tears streaking her cheeks. "You nearly died." Fermín pats her hand with a trembling grin. "Nearly only counts in horseshoes, grenades, and my romantic failures." Bea lets out a broken laugh. Fermín studies Daniel and Bea for a long moment, then says softly, "You two, take care of each other." Daniel feels heat rise in his chest, gratitude, fear,
love, all tangled into one thing. Bea rests her head on Daniel's shoulder. For a brief moment, the world outside the cellar stops existing. When the sun has risen fully, Daniel returns to Carax's bedside. The man is awake, staring at the low ceiling, lost in memories he's carried alone for most of his life. "Your book saved me," Daniel says quietly. "Shadow of the Wind. It changed everything." Carax turns to him. "Stories are mirrors, Daniel. You found yourself in mine." Daniel shakes his head fiercely. "I found you." Carax's eyes soften, the first hint of peace Daniel has seen on his face. He gestures weakly to the stack of letters and manuscripts Daniel brought from Nuria's apartment. "You read them?" Daniel nods. "All of them." Carax exhales. "Then you know what happened, what I became." Daniel says, "You became someone who survived." Carax's throat tightens. "I burned every copy of my books I could find because I thought destroying the story might destroy the pain." Daniel reaches for his hand. "But the world kept one copy, mine." Carax closes his eyes, tears slipping down his scarred cheeks. "And you carried it, so it would not disappear." Daniel nods. "I carried you." A long silence fills the cellar, not empty, but full of everything Carax never thought he would hear. Finally, Carax murmurs, "Thank you. Thank you for finding me before I became only a ghost." Daniel swallows hard. "You're not a ghost. You're a man, and you're still alive." Carax smiles faintly, the smile of someone opening a window after years in the dark. "Then help me," he whispers. "Help me finish the last chapter." Daniel nods without hesitation. "I will." Bea joins them moments later, brushing dust from her skirt. "We need to talk about what happens next," she says. Daniel looks at Carax, pale but alive, Fermín, bruised but breathing, Bea, fierce and brave and unwavering beside him. What happens next? Everything. Daniel finally understands what the Cemetery of Forgotten Books truly meant. Not just a sanctuary for stories, but a place where the lost are remembered, where broken things are carried back into the light. And now the story of Julián Carax, a story buried under ashes, lies, and heartbreak, has found witnesses who refuse to let it die. Daniel squeezes Bea's hand. Carax closes his eyes. Fermín exhales softly. The storm is ending, and the sun is rising on the final act.
Daniel wakes in Barcelo's cellar hours later, curled on a blanket between Bea and Fermín, the scent of old paper and ink filling the air. The world above continues its morning routine. Distant footsteps, market vendors calling out prices, tram bells echoing through the streets. To everyone in Barcelona, it is a normal day. But for Daniel, nothing is normal anymore. He moves quietly through the dim cellar, checking on Fermín first. The older man sleeps restlessly, wincing from every shift of his wounded side. Even in pain, he mutters fragments of jokes under his breath, as if to refuse to surrender his identity to suffering. Barceló sits nearby, sipping coffee and watching Fermín with unexpected tenderness. "He's strong," Barceló says quietly. "Stubborn men live longer than the sensible ones." Daniel nods, grateful beyond words. Then he turns to Carax. The author lies on a cot under a stack of blankets, breathing shallowly.
His face looks impossibly fragile, the scars harsh in the cellar's cold light, but his expression peaceful in a way Daniel hasn't seen before. Carax opens his eyes as Daniel approaches. "You should sleep," Carax murmurs. Daniel shakes his head. "I'm not tired." Carax smiles faintly, a smile that says he sees through the lie. "You remind me of myself," he whispers, "too restless to let the world move without you." Daniel sits beside him. "I'm here," he says softly. Carax studies him for a long moment, then asks, "You knew everything before you found me. What happened to Penelope? What her father did? What I became? And you still came." Daniel nods. "I wanted to understand, and I wanted to help." Carax's eyes glisten. "You did help. You did what no one else could." Daniel's chest tightens. "Carax, you're not alone anymore." Carax closes his eyes, overcome. Bea arrives carrying food, bread, cheese, and hot broth. She kneels beside Carax and gently lifts a spoon to his lips, insisting he eat. Though he can barely manage a mouthful, he gives her a grateful nod. "You have a strong spirit," Carax observes. Bea smiles. "I learned from the best." Daniel blushes. Bea takes Daniel's hand and squeezes it. For a moment, the three of them form a quiet tableau. The girl who never gave up, the boy who followed a story into the shadows, and the man who lived long enough to see his story brought back into the light. Later that evening, Daniel and Bea walk outside for air, while Barceló watches over the wounded men. The city glows with warm lamplight, as if unaware of the darkness that nearly swallowed them. Bea stops and looks at Daniel with a seriousness he rarely sees in her. "We should tell your father," she says. Daniel tenses. I don't want him involved in this anymore. It's too dangerous." Bea steps closer. "He's your family. He deserves to know you're safe." Daniel exhales, the truth settling heavily on him. "Yes," he whispers, "you're right." Bea touches his cheek. "I'll go with you." Daniel feels a warmth spread through him, a sense of partnership, of a future he didn't dare to imagine. On their way back, they talk about everything and nothing. Their childhood memories, jokes about Fermin's inflated ego, dreams they'd never had the courage to share. The fear of the last few days begins to soften into something gentler. As they walk, Daniel suddenly stops. "Bea." She turns, eyebrows raised. Daniel swallows. "I don't want to lose you." Bea steps close, her voice warm and steady. "You won't." She kisses her lightly, a kiss filled with relief, with gratitude, with new beginnings. When they part, Daniel feels a strength he hasn't felt since the day he first opened the Shadow of the Wind. Back in the cellar, Barceló meets them at the stairs. "Carax is asking for you." Daniel hurries down. Carax is sitting upright now, propped by pillows. His breathing is shallow, but his eyes are sharp and clear. When Daniel approaches, he gestures toward a small, worn suitcase beside the cot. Inside are the last surviving pages of The Shadow of the Wind, handwritten manuscripts, fragments of novels and letters Daniel has never seen before. Carax speaks slowly, his voice fragile. "These are the pieces of my life I could never bring myself to burn. I want you to keep them." Daniel hesitates. "But they're yours." Carax shakes his head gently. "Stories belong to those who keep them alive. You saved mine. You and Bea and Fermin." Daniel's eyes blur with tears. Carax continues, "Promise me something, Daniel. When the time comes, tell my story the way you told it to yourself. Not perfect, not heroic, just true." Daniel nods. I promise. Karak smiles, the soft, bittersweet smile of a man who has carried a lifetime of grief and finally laid some of it down. As the days pass, Karak slowly recovers under their care. Fermín regains color, his humor returning with every bandage change. Bea helps at the bookshop, her presence brightening Daniel's world in ways he doesn't have words for yet. One evening, Barcelona glows with warm summer light as Daniel and Bea stand on the balcony above the shop. Below them, the street hums with gentle life. Vendors, laughter, the distant sound of church bells. Bea leans against Daniel. "You did it," she whispers. "You found him." Daniel wraps his arm around her. "We found him," he says. "All of us." She smiles. "So, what happens now?" Daniel looks toward the horizon, toward the cemetery of forgotten books, toward the city that held so many secrets, toward the future he never thought he'd have. "Now," he says softly, "now we make sure the story lives." And the city, still glowing beneath the fading dusk, seems to breathe with them, as if turning the final page of a chapter that waited decades to be written. The storm has passed, the ghosts are quiet, but the story endures.
Months pass. Summer fades into the soft melancholy of early autumn, and Barcelona settles into a gentler rhythm. The city feels different to Daniel now, not because its streets have changed, but because he has. The boy who once wandered the alleys dreaming of lost books and quiet mysteries has walked through fire, faced a monster, uncovered a tragic past, and carried a life back into the light. Now he walks with Bea through the familiar lanes surrounding the Sempere & Sons bookshop. Her hand fits comfortably in his, as though it had always been meant for his. Their steps fall in sync, their conversations softer, deeper, warmed by a kind of closeness forged through danger and devotion. They reach the bookshop just as Daniel's father flips the sign to open. He smiles gently at the sight of them, Bea returning each morning like a quiet sunrise in Daniel's life. Inside, the shop smells of fresh ink and aging paper. Rays of golden light slip through the dusty windows, illuminating the worn wooden floorboards that have witnessed the entire arc of Daniel's childhood. Daniel's father greets Bea with a warm nod, then turns to Daniel, placing a hand on his shoulder. "There's someone in the reading room asking for you." Daniel frowns. "Who?" His father smiles. "An old friend." Daniel feels his heart catch. He steps through the doorway into the back room, and there, sitting in one of the large armchairs, dressed neatly, postured dignified despite a hint of frailty, is Julián Carax. Carax looks up and smiles softly. "You're taller," he says. Daniel laughs, surprised by the warmth in his chest. "And you're alive." Carax smirks. "Against all odds." Daniel sits across from him. "How did you get out of Barcelo's cellar?" Carax lifts a cane beside him. Polished wood, a silver handle. "I had help," he says. "Your friend Fermín insisted I learn to walk in daylight again." Daniel grins. "That sounds like him." Carax's eyes soften as he studies Daniel more closely. "You look at peace," Carax says. "It suits you." Daniel blushes slightly. "I'm trying." Carax nods. "And Bea?" Daniel blushes harder, earning a rare, genuine laugh from Carax. Outside, the city hums gently. Carax's voice drops. "I'm leaving Barcelona," he says quietly. Daniel sits up straighter. "What?
Why? Kerax looks toward the window as if staring at ghosts only he can see. This city is full of memories, he murmurs. Some beautiful, many unbearable. I've spent too long walking among ashes. It's time to go somewhere new. Daniel swallows the rising ache in his chest. Where will you go? Kerax shrugs. Paris, perhaps, or Lyon, or maybe a small town where no one has ever heard my name. He looks at Daniel again. Somewhere I can start over. Daniel nods, though his throat feels tight. Kerax places a hand on Daniel's arm. You gave me the chance to live again, he says softly, to breathe without choking on the past. I owe you more than you realize. Daniel shakes his head. You don't owe me anything. Kerax smiles. Then allow me to give a gift freely. He reaches into his coat and pulls out a small package wrapped in brown paper. Daniel hesitates, then unwraps it carefully. Inside is a beautifully bound manuscript, handwritten on crisp, carefully prepared pages. Daniel's breath stops. It's a new novel. Kerax's. What is this? He whispers. Kerax takes a slow breath. It's the book I never finished, the one I thought I had no right to write. But Nuria believed in it, and you believed in me, so I found the courage to give it an ending. Daniel runs his hand over the title page, The Angel of Mist, Julian Kerax. His eyes burn with emotion. I want you to keep it, Kerax says gently, and when you're ready, when the world is ready, you may decide what to do with it. Daniel's voice cracks. I don't know what to say. Kerax squeezes his arm. Say nothing. Just live your story. Fermín arrives a few minutes later, limping but proud, with scars he wears like medals of honor. He greets Kerax with a mock salute. Look at you, Señor Author, up and walking, terrorizing bookshops again. Kerax chuckles. And you, Señor Romero de Torres, are decidedly harder to kill than expected. He winks. That's what all my enemies say. He pats Daniel's back, then Bia's shoulder, then glances around the shop affectionately. Feels like home, doesn't it? Daniel nods. Kerax rises slowly, leaning on his cane. It's time, he says. Daniel's breath catches. Kerax steps closer, placing both hands on Daniel's shoulders. Thank you, he whispers. For a long moment, they simply look at each other. Two lives intertwined by fate, tragedy, and hope. Then Kerax turns toward the door. Fermín walks with him. Bia squeezes Daniel's hand, and Daniel watches as the man whose story reshaped his life steps out into the Barcelona morning, the sunlight catching the edges of his coat, his silhouette merging with the city's pulse. Julian Kerax, survivor, ghost, author, disappears into the crowd, beginning his second life. That night, Daniel returns to the cemetery of forgotten books. The great wooden doors open with familiar weight. The labyrinth breathes softly, like a living cathedral of stories waiting to be remembered. Daniel walks deeper and deeper until he reaches the same chamber where, years ago, he first found The Shadow of the Wind. He places Kerax's new novel in the center of the stone table. A tribute, a promise, a continuation. Your story lives, he whispers.
The candles flicker, as if in acknowledgement. And Daniel Sempere steps out of the cemetery of forgotten books, no longer the boy searching for answers, but the young man ready to build a life of his own, with Bea, with Fermín, with his father, with all the stories that shaped him. The city exhales. A new chapter begins.
Autumn deepens in Barcelona, painting the city in warm golds and soft browns. Leaves gather in alleys like forgotten letters, swirling at the feet of passers-by. The world feels quieter to Daniel now, not because it has grown silent, but because he has learned to listen differently. He wakes early each morning to help open Sempere and Sons. The bell above the door greets him with its familiar chime, echoing memories of childhood, secrecy, and discovery. Only now he walks as someone changed, someone who has lived inside shadows and emerged with a deeper understanding of the world, of love, and of himself. Bea arrives soon after, carrying pastries from the bakery down the street. Daniel's father smiles warmly each time she walks in, sensing the unspoken promise growing between Daniel and the girl who refused to let fear dim her courage. "Buenos días," Bea says with a soft smile. Daniel's father bows slightly. "Buenos días, Bea. You make the shop brighter." Daniel's heart swells every time he hears this, not out of pride, but out of gratitude. Gratitude that Bea is part of their world now. She helps in the shop for hours, organizing shelves, laughing with customers, and listening to Daniel's father tell stories of rare books as though each one were a living entity with a pulse. Daniel watches her often, the way she moves through the shop without hesitation, how she understands the rhythm of the place as though she'd always belonged. It feels natural, easy, right. Fermín returns to the shop weeks later, his wound healed enough to let him walk without wincing, most of the time. He arrives in grand fashion, banging open the door and throwing his arms wide. "Ladies and gentlemen, did you miss me, or did the peace and quiet nearly put you in the grave?" Daniel laughs and pulls him into a tight hug, his eyes stinging with emotion. "You look good," Daniel says. Fermín smirks. "I know, tragic, isn't it?" Bea hugs him next, and Fermín immediately starts teasing her about Daniel's lovesick expression, which sends Daniel into a mortified blush. Even Daniel's father looks relieved to see Fermín alive and standing upright. Fermín wastes no time slipping back into his old charisma and mischief. He regales customers with embellished tales of his heroic confrontation with Humero, each version more ridiculous than the last, usually ending with him proclaiming, "I don't want to say I'm a legend, but the evidence speaks for itself." Daniel's father eventually grows curious. "Fermín," he asks one afternoon, "what will you do now that you're back among the living?" Fermín lets out a long sigh, dramatically leaning against a bookshelf. "Well, I've been thinking. I believe it's time I settle down, find a respectable job, a respectable wife, build a respectable life." Daniel chuckles. "Respectable? You?" Fermín waves a hand. "Do not stifle my growth, Danielito. I'll have you know I've recently been courting a certain someone." Daniel raises an eyebrow. "Oh?" Fermín grins sheepishly. "She said she'd consider it if I could go one full week without getting stabbed, shot, hunted, or chased." Daniel laughs so hard he nearly drops the stack of books he's carrying. Later that evening, Bea helps close the shop,
while Daniel's father prepares dinner upstairs. The warmth of the shop envelops them. The scent of old pages and wood polish mixes with the faint aroma of stew drifting down from the apartment. "Your father likes having me here," Bea says softly, sliding a book onto a shelf. "Of course he does," Daniel replies. "He sees how happy you make me." Bea pauses, her expression softening. "And you make me feel safe," she says. "Safe in a way I didn't think possible." Daniel steps closer, his voice quiet. "You are safe. Here. With us." Her smile widens, warm as sunlight. "Then I'd like to stay." The moment hangs in the air, unspoken, but understood. Stay with us. Stay with me. Stay in this life we're building together. Daniel leans forward and kisses her forehead, his chest swelling with a tenderness he can barely contain. Fermín interrupts a moment later, bursting through the doorway with his usual flair. "Ah, yes, young love in a bookshop. It's like a scandal waiting to happen." Bea throws him a folded rag. "Go upstairs before I tell your girlfriend you're misbehaving." Fermín gasps theatrically. "Bea, how cruel, using my blossoming romance against me." Daniel laughs, grateful for Fermín's meddling warmth, even if it drives him insane sometimes. Life, after months of chaos, is beginning to feel whole again. Later that night, Daniel walks alone to the balcony above the shop. Barcelona stretches out before him, a maze of rooftops, chimneys, and glowing windows. The wind carries the distant hum of music, the laughter of strangers, the heartbeat of the city he loves. He pulls a folded letter from his pocket, a letter from Carax, sent a week after the author left Barcelona. He unfolds it carefully. "I am writing from Lyon," Carax writes. "The air is cold but clean. The nights are quiet. And for the first time in years, I feel something I had forgotten the taste of. Hope." Daniel smiles softly. "Thank you for giving me back my life. Thank you for carrying my story when I was too weak to carry it myself. And Daniel, write yours, not for the world, not for glory, for yourself." Daniel closes his eyes, letting those words sink deep into his heart. Write your story. He looks out over the city, thinking of everything that brought him to this moment. The labyrinthine cemetery, the mysterious book that started it all, Carax's tragedy, Fumero's cruelty, Bea's love, Fermín's unbreakable loyalty, his father's quiet strength. Every piece of his life, every secret, every miracle, every heartbreak, they were all chapters of something larger, something waiting to be written. Daniel exhales slowly. "Yes," he whispers into the night air. "I will." Below, the lights of Barcelona shimmer like scattered embers. The story continues, not Carax's, not Penelope's, not Fumero's, Daniel's. And he is ready to begin.
Winter settles over Barcelona, bringing with it a soft quietude that wraps the city like a shawl. Chimneys puff smoke into the sky, streets grow empty earlier each evening, and the glow of lanterns spills gold across the cobblestones. Inside Semper and Sons, the warmth of the bookshop offers refuge from the cold, drawing regulars and newcomers alike. Daniel spends most days shelving new arrivals, repairing cracked book spines, and watching Bea charm customers with her bright intelligence and gentle poise. She fits into the life of the bookshop like a final puzzle piece Daniel never realized was missing.
Fermín becomes an essential fixture again as well, his energy a constant ember that refuses to die. On slow afternoons, he regales patrons with exaggerated stories of his past adventures, only half of which Daniel suspects are true. But even in his most ridiculous moments, Fermín guards Daniel and Bea with the fierce loyalty of a man who knows the cost of losing the ones he loves. Life feels full. Life feels new. But one chapter is not yet closed. One cold morning, a letter arrives addressed to Señor Daniel Sempere. Daniel recognizes the handwriting immediately. Elegant, deliberate, unmistakable. Carax. His heart jumps when he opens it at the counter while Bea and his father watch quietly from across the shop. Daniel unfolds the paper and begins to read. "My dear Daniel," the letter begins, "I have settled in a small town near the Rhone River. It is peaceful here, quiet enough that I can hear myself think, yet alive enough that I no longer feel like a ghost hiding in the shadows." Daniel can almost hear Carax's soft, raspy voice reading the words aloud. "I walk the marketplace each morning. The booksellers know me by a different name, the name of a nobody, which I wear with gratitude. Sometimes I imagine you walking beside me, asking questions about old manuscripts and watching the world with that earnest wonder of yours." Daniel smiles, his throat tightening. "I wish to tell you that I have begun writing again, this time without fear, without shame, without ghosts whispering in my ear. The burden of my past has not vanished, but you helped me see that it does not have to define the end of my story." Daniel feels Bea slip her hand into his, squeezing gently. "The Angel of Mist is complete," Carax writes, "and now I am beginning something new. A story about a boy who found a forgotten book and through it rescued a man from oblivion. Perhaps you will recognize the inspiration." Tears well in Daniel's eyes. "One day, if the world is kind, I hope to see Barcelona again. But if not, know that you have given me more than you can imagine. Your friend, Julian Carax." The letter ends there. Simple and quiet, yet carrying the weight of a life reborn. Daniel folds it carefully, as though it might crumble under the softness of the air. Bea rests her head on his shoulder. "He sounds happy," she says. Daniel nods. For the first time, I think he truly is. His father watches them from behind the counter with quiet pride. "You should keep that letter somewhere special," he says. "I know exactly where," Daniel replies. That night, Daniel returns to the cemetery of forgotten books. The labyrinth's doors creak open, and the familiar scent of old parchment and forgotten stories surrounds him like a memory made of dust and candlelight. Isaac, the caretaker, nods to him. "Back again, Daniel?" Daniel smiles. "There's something I need to leave." Isaac gestures toward the deep corridors. "Go on then. Stories find their place." Daniel walks through the silent halls, each turn illuminated by warm pools of lamplight. The shelves stand like ancient watchers, filled with stories waiting for readers brave enough to discover them. He reaches the heart of the labyrinth, the same chamber where he once found the shadow of the wind as a boy. This time he brings two things: Carax's letter, and the manuscript Carax asked him to guard. He places the manuscript on the stone pedestal. But the letter, he holds it in his hand a moment longer, thinking of everything Carax gave him, mysteries, heartbreak, courage, purpose, and now closure. He tucks the letter inside the manuscript's first page, a silent acknowledgement that all stories, even the ones filled with sorrow, are made stronger by the people who carry them. He steps back. A single candle flickers beside the manuscript, its flames small but unwavering, casting gentle shadows across the room. "Rest here," he whispers, "and be remembered." When he leaves the cemetery, the city feels different again. Not haunted, not wounded, simply alive, vibrant, imperfect, filled with stories unfolding every second. He walks home beneath the soft winter sky, thinking of Bea waiting for him, of Fermín planning his unlikely wedding, of his father smiling each evening over dinner, and of Carax writing in some quiet French town where the past cannot reach him. He thinks of the boy he once was, frightened, hopeful, searching through the fog, and he realizes something profound. He found what he was searching for, not just a book, not just a mystery, not just a man. He found himself. Months later, in the warmth of early spring, Daniel sits on the balcony with Bea as they begin discussing their future together. The sun sets behind the rooftops, casting long shadows over the city. Bea rests her head against his shoulder and whispers, "We should start our own story." Daniel smiles. "We already have." And as the final light fades from the sky, he looks out over Barcelona, a city that once felt like a labyrinth of secrets, and now feels like a home filled with endless beginnings. In that moment, Daniel understands what all great stories teach in the end. No story truly ends. It only waits for the next reader. And the shadow of the wind, Carax's wind, carries on.